Hey, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Trend Report. Glad you're joining me today for another interesting and fun conversation with my guest, Aaron Estabrook. Aaron, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Sid. Thanks for having me.
So, Aaron, I don't really like to do formal introductions of everybody. I like for our guests to introduce themselves. So please take just a moment and introduce yourself. Tell us who you are and what you do.
As Sid mentioned, my name is Aaron Estabrook. Currently, I'm the Director of Digital Marketing here at OFS. My job at OFS currently is to oversee our entire, essentially, marketing communications infrastructure. So that's social media, that's paid media, that's earned media, that is email marketing, that's podcasting. It's my job to work with an incredibly talented team throughout our entire organization to create content and information that our customers want to engage with, like truly want to engage with. And then we keep serving them more of the stuff they want. That brings people closer to our brand and helps them understand our products and our services a little bit more. So that's the broadest way to describe what I do, and probably the thinnest way, but hopefully that makes sense.
Well, I appreciate it. I fully understand it. Hopefully, our listeners do too. We're going to dive into a couple of those topics today, but I am really curious to always learn about people's journey into the office furniture industry. How did you get to the office furniture industry?
It's a good question. I'm still trying to figure that out myself, Sid.
Actually, the better question is, why did you stay, right?
Oh, I'll tell you why I'll stay. That's for sure. I would say my journey actually starts in the music business. When I was in, believe it or not, like high school, back when there was the Facebook and MySpace, I had a hunch that the music business is going to want to use social media to communicate their musicians. And it was like my little aha when I was like 16 and 17. I was like, this is the way in. This is how you get into the music business. And so I went to Indiana University, and very long story short, while I was in Bloomington, Indiana, my friend and I started a little promotion business. He would book the shows and I would promote them. And we worked as a really good team for 3 or 4 years. And then towards the tail end of my time there, I get a call from one of the largest PR companies in the world that said, hey, like, Aaron, we're really curious. We only send bands through Bloomington really to like, it's like a stop between like Chicago or St. Louis, like, kind of fuel up on gas, make a little extra scratch on the way. How are you selling out these shows and selling so much merchandise and seeing so much activity online from Bloomington? Would you be willing to come to New York City and help us figure this out? And so I did that.
Wow.
So I spent about a year in New York City. I realized I love the music business. I love music. It's a passion of mine, still is to this day. But I realized it's hard work, and I mean it's late nights. It's like you're out till 2 or 3 in the morning, and then you got to be back in the office at 9 a.m. the next day. So it was a lot of work, and speaking frankly, you get paid in access. So it's like, hey, you're not making a lot of money, but like go to any show you want, my man.
Yep.
So I went to grad school, went back to grad school at Ball State University. And then after grad school, I found myself in marketing and advertising agencies. Now I tell all that story about spending time in the music business because so much of what I do today, I draw from that experience and apply to design. So I lived in New York and DC, working in advertising agencies in those two cities. And then my wife and I wanted to start a family, moved back to Indiana. And that's how I found my way to OFS here in Huntingburg, Indiana. I was really lucky to make a connection with Ryan Mankey. And he and I started having conversations about, content, podcasting, marketing. And he offered me a really great opportunity that I just couldn't refuse. Although
I'm
I didn't make
curious.
it. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just curious. Did you know about the furniture industry before you discovered OFS and met Ryan?
Not at all. I mean, I
Yeah.
knew it. I would say I knew it in the same way that folks outside our industry knew it. What I mean is like you knew that there were architects and designers, but I don't think I knew the depth in the colors and the vibrancy of this business, the contract furniture business, until you're really in it. And so that's what's been such a beautiful journey for me, is getting to know these incredible architects, incredible A&D designers, and certainly these incredible dealer designers, that in these little pockets that exist throughout the country of just amazing individuals that are artists in their own right. So that's been an amazing opportunity, and that's what I've been really fortunate to be able to draw those people into the light, so to speak, through podcasting and video content work, and through a lot of the content that we do here at OFS.
That's awesome. And so I agree with you that I think the people are really the best part of our industry. And then when you really start to dive in to discover what we really do, it is fascinating to people on the outside, all the intricacies and things that we have to go through in order to make workplaces function and look the way that they look. But the people in and of itself, to me, it's one of, if it's one of the best, if not the best things about our industry.
No doubt, no doubt. And I just feel like the deeper you go and the more people you meet, you can't believe some of the folks that are in our industry. And our industry, this, I'll call it the contract furniture industry, is so seemingly tiny. And you would think you could learn everybody in inside 5 years, but you don't. And you find these incredible folks just tucked around the country that, man, sometimes you're like, how are you not how are you not on network television? How does people not know more about who you are? They're amazing. And so
I will say that's one of the best parts about my podcast, is the ability to meet new people and the doors that it opens, and to be able to share some really, really powerful stories, and to introduce our listeners to people like you, but also to give people that come onto the show a bit of a voice to share their story.
Oh, no doubt. And so actually, I'm going to give a quick plug, shameless plug.
Sure.
Which is, we manage a podcast network here at OFS. It's the Imagine a Place Productions podcast network. And on that is our flagship podcast called Imagine a Place, hosted by the lovely Doug Shapiro. And we had an incredible conversation with this gentleman. His name's Alejandro Estrada, and he's at HOK out of Miami. And we found him. We went and did an event. Doug and I were speaking at their New Year, New You event down there. And we were just having a conversation with this individual, and he starts telling us about, he's from Colombia and how his family immigrated to Colombia. And it's like such an American story. I love it so much, from this very difficult upbringing, this very, tough time in his life in Colombia, making it to Miami, learning English, finding his way to the community of design. I mean, that story alone, I'm like, I couldn't believe that we were even hearing that. And we were like, well, we have to put this on a podcast. And that's some of the things that doesn't even feel like work to me. And so that's why it feels like I'm so privileged to work in this industry, and certainly for OFS. But this industry in and of itself just lends itself to just such beautiful stories like that.
So I appreciate that story. And we're going to be sure that we drop the link to that episode down in the show notes for our listeners to be able to go grab it. And I think there's so many different stories in our industry and so many different ways to share them. So I appreciate especially highlighting immigrants and how they've come in. Literally, you're highlighting the American dream, right?
No doubt.
And I think that's important to share and show how our industry can participate in that as well. But let's shift gears for a minute and let's talk a little bit about how you got into personal branding. When was that little fire that was lit under you that said this personal branding thing is pretty important?
Great question. I was working in Washington, D.C., and my role there, I was working at a digital marketing company, and while I was there, my background, I used to teach public speaking. All right. And so when I was teaching public speaking in grad school, the folks at that agency that I was working at, MSL Group at the time, they were like, hey, public speaking, hey, you should come with us. We do media training. And what they would do for folks is like folks that were going on like Fox News and
Mhm.
MSNBC and CNN and all these other shows, they had these like senators and politicians that were coming in. And so there's two parts to this story. That was where I started to understand the tactical use of personal branding to create a story about yourself. So there are these tactics that human beings should use and do and be able to repeat in a clear and concise and confident
Mhm.
manner that reveals something about who you are as a person and what you're about, like what your objectives are, what your passions are, why you do what you do. And that was amazing. It was like building almost like this little engine. Now, I had been doing some of that. If I rewind a little bit, that's one piece. So we'll call that like the tactical understanding of how to build a media personality. But before that, in the music industry, one of the biggest ahas that I was really proud to bring to the organization that I was working at was communicating to record labels and to these PR firms and to the artists themselves that folks want to learn about you, not just the band. And if I can tell one anecdote, I was in a meeting and I'm like this young, like I don't know anything, Sid. Like I don't know anything. Okay. I barely understand how to use the subway to get to work at this point.
Sure.
But I'm in this meeting with a record label and we have a record release that's coming up. And everybody's pitching ideas in the same way that you release a product
Mhm.
inside our world and pitching ideas. And it was novel at the time, but seems standard today, which was I said, hey, like we should take the lead singer and let's get a camera inside the tour bus and let's see what he's eating and listening to and watching. He was a big soccer fan at the time. And they all stopped and they said, well, we can't, Aaron, like that's a good idea, but like we can't show what he's listening to because that his fans will go buy those records and not his records. And my
Mm.
thesis was, I don't know, like I think if we get people, if people understand who this person is more, they'll be more interested into him and the band itself. And so and I'll shout him out, Brian Long at Figure Eight Management. God bless you, Brian. And Ken Weinstein at Big Hassle Media. Thank you, Ken. Love you both. They championed that. They said, let's let it rip. Let's try it. And
Mhm.
sure enough, ticket sales went up, merchandise sales went up. And so that was like, wow, like, okay,
Mhm.
we feel comfortable doing this. And the artist at the time, who I guess if I shouted those, his name was Jose Gonzalez. Jose was like, he's like, okay, like I'm willing to do that now. And so I take that time from my ad agency background, the tactical use of personal branding, and then the what I would call from my time in the music business, the philosophical use of personal branding. And I started applying that
Mhm.
in corporate America. So like to Mayo Clinic,
Yep.
I even used elements of this into some pretty standard areas of the world, and it draws people in so fast because people are
Mhm.
really curious about other human beings, not so much the logo. And that's been a big shift for folks.
Mhm.
That was hopefully that made sense.
No, it made perfect sense to me. And this is something that I talk about a lot on the show. And I'm sure that our regular listeners are following you as well. But I love the story of how you told that and the kind of the behind the scenes. It's giving people a glimpse into who you are. And at the end of the day, people do business with people, right?
Absolutely.
And the musician example, though they're not doing business necessarily as a transaction person to person, they are buying music, paraphernalia, swag, all that kind of stuff. So that it is still a person to person. They're doing business with a person that they've
Yeah.
come to know, like, and trust. And we've heard that phrase a lot in the world of especially online marketing and online branding as all these social media platforms continue to emerge and rise. It's all about knowing you, liking you, and trusting you.
100%. And actually, one of the things that I've been communicating to folks is what's been so beautiful and why I love this industry so much is I actually have been taking a lot, like dusting off a lot of my ideas from when I was working in music and applying them to the
Mm-hmm.
to the design industry because I look at designers, individual designers as musicians
Mm-hmm.
and the design firms that they work for as like the record label.
Mhm.
because it says so. The way these record labels work is each record label has their own vibe. Like one of my favorite record labels is Secretly Canadian, right here in Indiana,
Mhm.
and Bloomington, Indiana, and they collect artists based on kind of a common theme or a common kind of voice.
Mhm.
And I actually, in the more that you can communicate those individuals with inside the larger record label, the more people start coming to that, let's say, design
Mhm.
firm. The more designers that you communicate out in the world and communicate in a way that they feel good about too, um, the more it attracts people to your overall brand. And that's
Mhm.
been the big kind of shift, just not in
Mhm.
our industry, but in other industries as well, probably over the last, I would say 10 years, but more so in the last 3 to 4.
Sure. So this makes me think about something that I really would like to ask you is why is it that our industry collectively, and I'm generalizing as a whole, we are so heavy product focused? When we push things out into social media, content, whatever we're doing, it typically is always leading product first, right? Rather than leading with people first. And what I've heard you just talk about and the examples that you've been giving is it should be people first, product second. So
Right.
why do you think our industry is that way? And then the follow-up question to that, Aaron, is how do we shift it to be more people first?
Great question. It was, and again, I mean this in all sincerity. It's one of the reasons that it attracted me to OFS. It was that theory or that idea that Ryan Mankey and Molly Mankey were attracted to. They had a very people first methodology, but you hear that so often.
Mhm.
You hear the idea of like we're a people first company, but I think where it breaks down is, well, what does that look like? What does it mean to be a people first? Yes, you could talk about like building products and services that fit the human experience, absolutely, but even then you have to be specific. So I think your first question was, why are we so product focused? It's a reflex. And I believe, and you kind of go with what you know.
Mhm.
And some of the product level marketing and advertising and communication that is in our industry, not just from OFS, but like across even our competitor mindset. I mean,
Mhm.
there are some competitors that we look at that are just, I think they do an amazing job in in terms of their product marketing. It and they do so great, but it's what they know and feel comfortable with. After all, they're
Sure.
manufacturers, right? They've
Mhm.
spent decades building and manufacturing. And then the idea that you would take the light. Now, this is the scary part. You take this flashlight and you move it off the thing that you put all this time and effort on, and you put it onto like a product engineer that's kind of
Mhm.
in your company somewhere, or the designer that's kind of always been quietly kind of, that is a new concept.
Yep.
But again, I go back to that idea of, I think about that record label executive that was like, we can't do that. There's no way. There's no
Mhm.
people, we need to focus on the record. Let's talk
Mhm.
about the record. And the minute we turned it over to the musician and focused on what their instincts are,
Mhm.
what their curiosities are, what their struggles are. That's the other thing. People talk
Mhm.
about vulnerability and authenticity in our business, but when you're doing things in public, when you're saying, I really struggled with this product design, I really struggled with trying to understand, you know, it's the sustainability story of this product. And I did the best I could with what I got right now in our sustainability journey.
Mhm.
Wow. People say like, hey, that's really fair. Or I struggled with this side of the way in which this product was built with the new world we
Mhm.
live in. Man, people love hearing that. And actually, if I this is just a shout out, Fastnet, Sid, I'll tell you that. So one of the individuals that does that best is Brian Graham.
Yeah.
Um, Brian Graham is just so good at communicating who he is as a person
Mhm.
and how that bleeds into the work and the products that he does. So that's a long way of answering why are we so product focused? I
Mhm.
think it's because, and it's not, it's sometimes it's not a conscious thing, but it's just you're just comfortable in that spot.
So Brian is a really awesome dude, and he was a guest on my show. and I'm looking for it right now. He was episode number 52. Your episode like 124, I believe, or 125. Yeah. He was episode 52. But yeah, you're absolutely right. He does an amazing job in all of his channels of showing the things that I've learned and things I'm working on and sketches and stuff like that. And you're drawn in to that story that he's telling you. But Aaron, why are people so reluctant to stand up and share their voice? I mean, I remember when I started doing it, I mean, it was foreign to me to be able to do that. And then I started and it just kept going and going. And people like you, Alexandra, so many other people that are sharing their voice. Why are so many people in our industry reluctant to stand up and share their voice?
Okay, so I can answer this. I love this question. One is, let's say, from the time, okay, you're going to help me out with this one. So
okay.
I'm going to say a phrase and then you're going to repeat something to
okay.
me. Okay.
Whose show is this, by the way? I'm just kidding.
It's mine now, right? This is the Aaron Report. All right. That. So, okay. So this is, so from the time we are, let's say 0, our age, to let's say 5, before we go to school, whether this is all subconscious work that we're going to talk about.
Right.
We are told children should be seen and not
heard.
Exactly. Right. So whether that's a common phrase, and we're like shushed a lot. There's like a kids table. Let's like go downstairs, go outside. Right. And if you're, here in the summers in Indiana, my mom was just like, just go outside. And then if you're thirsty, drink from the hose. Right. It's like, that's the experience. Right. Love you, Mom. But then, okay, then you start school from the time, let's say you're 5 to say 26. Right. And Sid, if you have a question, you want to make a statement, you want to leave the room, what do you have to do?
Raise your hand.
Oh, excuse me. What do you have to do, Sid?
You have to raise your hand.
Yeah.
And ask.
Yeah. But you do it silently.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I'm doing, if you're watching on YouTube, you see me, I raised my hand, right? As a natural reaction to that. But yes, you just raise your hand and sit there and wait for somebody to call on you.
You have to be selected. And so that is that's either conscious or subconscious that works into our DNA. I'm not done yet, Sid.
Okay.
So then you go through school and you have that experience. Okay. Then you go into the workforce. In the workforce, your first 1-2 years, when you get that first job, typically what your manager or the person that's overseeing your work, what do they tell you? It's like, just absorb, just take it in, right? And you might do that for 2, 3, 4 years where you're kind of just working quietly and diligently and working very hard, but working in the same patterns that you had from school. And then a day happens where it's like, somebody knocks on your door and they're like, hey, good news, bad news. Rebecca, senior designer or, director, she's going to be leaving our organization. You've been doing such great work. Congratulations on your promotion. Now you manage people and you get to make decisions. Now, is there any curiosity now on why we have so much imposter syndrome? So now all of a sudden you're like, am I good enough? Like, they're going to find me out. Like, that's the thought. And that lasts well into adulthood. I work with executives, oftentimes with like one-on-one communication coaching. And some of the folks that I work with, I can't believe on how much imposter syndrome that they have. So that's a social psychological reason on why we are so reluctant to be visible. So, and then the other one is, we're not trained on how to develop our personal brand. We're not trained on how to leverage social media as our online portfolio. We're not trained in those ways because unfortunately, unless you're at a really, really great school, you have some really great mentors, they don't know it themselves.
Yeah.
And so that's why, I'm so passionate about this subject because it's so powerful. And oftentimes in our lives, we just haven't had folks to say, hey, like, this is how you can communicate who you are. And here's how powerful it can be in your career and how powerful it can be for your organization.
So that was, again, another very eloquent explanation of something, and taking us on a journey through the full understanding of why people aren't raising their voice. And in addition to imposter syndrome, I would also add to it that there is a fear of judgment by others. Oh, what are people going to say about me? Or what if I say something wrong? Or what if my boss sees this and doesn't like it? There's so many what ifs out there. And I think that's one of the couple of things there that just stop people from doing it. But I also believe there are some amazing people in our industry that need to share their voice. So
No, no.
let's take the opposite question then. What would you say the top 3 or 4 things are? What advice would you give to someone who's considering stepping out and sharing their voice, regardless of where they are along that pendulum that you just described, that would help them to start sharing their voice?
First thing is, do not feel like you need to be a social media influencer. I think, social media was released upon us. All right. It was like everybody had the keys to a Ferrari and we're all on the highway at the same time, like crashing into each other. And nobody taught us the rules of the road on how to, maybe that's not the car I want to start with. You do not need to be unless you want to be, but you don't need to be this like global,
Yep.
Oprah Winfrey, like all encompassing on every media platform. The advice that I would give, especially if you have design contract furniture listeners for the purpose of this discussion, is think low and slow. The first thing I always coach people to do is go to LinkedIn and just clean up your profile. Just take some time and go through the activity of updating your picture, your description about yourself, who you've worked for, and the successes you've had at each, because going through that process is a twofold, almost compounding effect. Number one, it allows you to brand yourself on arguably one of the most underutilized platforms on the planet. And I mean that sincerely.
Yep, 100%, which is why I talk about it a lot, because I agree with you. It is totally underused. Keep going, though.
Definitely.
Love this.
It does that. But the other thing it does, it gets you thinking about yourself in a healthy way. Because in our culture, we have been coached and communicated to be like humble, right? Don't brag. We don't know what it means and how to brag about ourselves or to share our accomplishments or how to share our interests or to share who we are, because the internet didn't exist until about 30 years ago. And social media didn't exist truly until about 2005. So it's like that, going through that process allows you to think of yourself in these deep kind of philosophical ways. And it allows you to say, oh, okay, well, I do have an interest. So I would always start there. And then the next step is to, there's a book I recommend. It's called Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Great book. It's sitting on my shelf. It's a great book.
Love that book. Now, there's a lot I could say about that book. But one of the things that I do love is it is like pairing something that is difficult or strenuous or painful with something that might be like comforting or pleasurable. And that helps you kind of make changes. And so what I like to coach people to do is like set up your LinkedIn account, get it on your phone, put the app on your phone, and just exist on it. Just open it 10 minutes, maybe 10 minutes a day or 10 minutes once a week, and just feel what people are doing. Follow people in your industry and just see how people are using it. And what happens, it melts away what your perceptions are of that platform. Melts it right away. Okay. Then the next stage up the mountain, the next little step is just like things and maybe leave one comment. 10 or 15 minutes a week, Mondays, while you grab a cup of coffee, while it's cooling down, throw some tunes in, jump on LinkedIn while you're just kind of easing into your week, see what's going on in the world, check what's trending over on the top right, see what kind of things people are posting about to start the week, make a comment, make a few likes, and then move on. And then after you do that for a while and you're comfortable, then you can start going down a personal branding journey that is more deeper and more rich.
And I love that, low and slow. Just start, right? Get into it, and just really get started with it. And I think that's great advice. But let's go to the opposite of LinkedIn for a minute and let's talk about video.
Yeah,
And video content is really powerful. And
definitely.
people, obviously, we see the rise of TikTok, Instagram Reels, obviously YouTube and YouTube Shorts, and people love to consume video.
Yeah.
And one of the things I found very, very interesting is that as it relates to YouTube and TikTok, our industry is pretty much avoiding video, short form video.
Yeah.
And I
Yes.
find that very, very interesting because if you type in office furniture in YouTube, you're going to get people selling office furniture, crap office, not our world office furniture, right?
Right.
So what's the barrier to entry as it relates to video in our industry?
The barrier to entry of video. What a great question. There is a there's a couple different levels to that. Number one, the barriers to entry are twofold. One is, I would say, the language of the internet. That'd be number one. So
what does that mean, the language of the internet?
The language of the internet is how people choose to consume video and when it's chose to be consumed. So I think a lot of times we believe that we have 100% of everyone's attention 100% of the time. Mm-hmm. We believe that our customers are not in line at Starbucks. We believe that our customers, dare I say, aren't, at a stoplight. We believe that our customers aren't on a train somewhere, traveling to work. We believe that we have, when they see our content, they're going to stop and go, everything else in my life must stop now. And I must consume this 5-minute video and I will absorb.
Okay, wait, hang on. I love the sarcasm there because I'm quite sarcastic myself, but I really appreciate how you're describing that because that is exactly how we think that they're going to stop immediately and consume what we produced at that very moment.
100%. And actually, the way people consume content is more, it's more like it's 10:30 at night. They're laying on their side, in bed, relaxing. That is, I enjoy that. They're relaxing and they're scrolling through either Instagram Reels, TikTok, YouTube Shorts. They're just kind of exploring, discovering, wanting to be surprised, having a little bit of randomness. And so I would say that's a barrier to entry, is that the language of the internet is we're trying to communicate in ways that don't fit the way the internet used to work or works today.
Right.
The other one is, going back to personal branding, is one barrier is the reluctance, like being on camera, like you are, Sid, like you're great on camera, like you're amazing. And it's not easy. And if we're using a mountain analogy, what I was describing earlier, that's the base of the mountain. Like just setting up a LinkedIn profile, liking and engaging, just kind of existing. That's at the bottom of the mountain. Okay. The air down there is super thick. It's like easy to breathe. It's a little difficult to move around, but it's like easy. And so there's a lot of people. So getting noticed, not easy. But as you go up the mountain, you're creating posts, you're sharing articles, you're sharing photos. Now you're going up, 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 up. At the tippy top of the mountain is video. The air is thinnest. It's harder. It is harder psychologically, technically, but there's fewer people, Sid. And that's where you can stand out. Sure. Little mountain analogy for you today.
I love it, actually.
Yeah.
Because I remember, I'm laughing when you say I'm good on video, because I'm literally laughing out loud, because 6 years ago, I recorded my first video on LinkedIn. I was standing right here at my office door and people kept challenging me to create video. And I'm like, nobody wants to look at me, blah, blah, blah. So I had no light, nothing, no tripods, no microphone. I held my phone up like this you can't really see. If you're on YouTube, you can see me. I'm holding my hand up high.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at it and my hand is literally shaking. So I have it up against the window and I talked for like 45 seconds. I had a t-shirt on and blah, blah, blah. Right. I posted it. It did good. Right. And a couple of days later, I got a package in the mail. And I was like, what is this? I didn't know who, I still don't know who it's from. And it was a tripod. Yeah. And at the note in it that said, this will help you with your videos, keep going. I was like, I was scared to death to do it. Now, 6 years later, I'm super comfortable with it.
Yeah.
I don't have any, I personally, Sid, have no barriers to what I'm going to say. You
Right.
either like what I'm going to say or agree with me, or you're going to disagree with me. And if you disagree with me, let's have a conversation.
Mhm.
Let's talk about it. Tell me why
Yeah.
you disagree with me. Change my mind on whatever it is. But it is really hard for people to get comfortable, not just seeing themselves, but hearing themselves.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So I'll say this. It's like, first of all, I don't believe, and this is something we used to train. See, this goes back to the tactical side of media training. Some folks are better not on video. Like they're just better in the written word. They're better with photography.
Mm-hmm.
They're better in audio. So, have a podcast without video, right? If you want to share something about what's happening in our industry, maybe you just do text updates on LinkedIn instead of
Mm-hmm.
video updates. That there's no rule that says you have to go to video. However, from an acceleration and impact standpoint, video is super high up there, again, because you're
Mm-hmm.
at the top of the mountain, easier to be seen. So I always, it's something I encourage people to work up to. But I think
Mm-hmm.
one of the comfort that you have, Sid, is because you fear what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you start interacting with that mode of communication, because this isn't just a way of
Mm-hmm.
communicating, it's a communication channel. Once you start realizing, oh, like from a judgment standpoint, people don't
Mm-hmm.
like, want to say anything about my glasses or my hair, or the fact that like I'm in an all beige background, and I'm describing myself at this point. Um, that really doesn't matter as much as the quality and the information that I'm sharing.
Oh,
And
hang on. Say that
yeah,
again. Say that again, because that is so, I think, very important people understand.
yeah, I don't think it matters so much about the visual makeup necessarily. Like once you realize people are not going to judge you for the way you look, or
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to some degree,
Yep.
but
Yep.
the way you look or where you're at, but rather the quality of the information you're trying to share.
Mm-hmm.
You can put out a vibe that you're here for the community, like you're here to help communicate something that can help me in
Mm-hmm.
in my life, whether it's a design perspective or what's happening in the industry or what my take is on the Twitter rebrand or whatever it is. And that gives me something I can put in my pocket as a
Yep.
viewer. I don't even see the things that you think that they're
Yep.
going to.
100%. It's the quality of the content.
That's right.
Be sure you're putting out quality content. And I want to tie back to something you said a few minutes ago, which is, especially in video, it's not about showing me images of the product. It's about me hearing your voice as a person and
Yeah.
leaning into, as you said recently at NeoCon, the power of you. It's about
Yeah.
leaning into who you are and not just who the product is. Yes, product is important. Yes, we need to see it. Yes, we need to showcase it. But people really want to get to know the people behind the product and behind the brand. So you should stand up and talk about it. And I know it's scary. Listen, I've walked this path myself. This is and even today, Aaron, this is a barrier for me on TikTok.
Mhm.
I'm a huge consumer of TikTok. I get news on TikTok. I love TikTok,
Yeah, me
right?
too.
I've only created 6 videos on TikTok,
Yeah.
right? But it's a barrier for me. I one day get over it, but I try to pre-plan too much stuff. So that's part of my problem there. But it is important. People want to get to know who you are.
Yeah. And that absolutely is a barrier. And I'll tell you, like, once you're trained, so you mentioned my presentation at NeoCon.
Yep.
I was privileged, blessed, if I dare say, to be offered an opportunity to speak at this NeoCon recently and hold a
Mm-hmm.
workshop there on personal branding. And once, like, one of the unlocks is I take these folks through a journey where it's delineating between your values, your skills, and your interests. So
Mm-hmm.
your values can be like you value education, leadership, and mentorship. I'll use that as an example for me. And once you get folks understanding there's a difference between communicating your values and communicating your skills and communicating your personal and professional interests, it's like this quadrant.
Mm-hmm.
And once you realize that inside that quadrant, delineating and pairing those values, skills, and interests, in finding the right channels to communicate those with like specific tactics, it creates a host of great problems for you. Like you start to realize how easy this is. And it's like, why aren't more people doing this? And it just comes down to not having training or encouragement, because it's kind of just like this repeating problem, right? You didn't
Sure.
get training or encouragement in college, and then you go into the workforce and the people under you don't get it, et cetera, et cetera. So that absolutely is a role that plays. And again, just finding the right channel to communicate the most quality information. TikTok might not be the best platform, let's say, for Sid Meadows, but he might find a slice of him that is perfect for that platform.
Sure. 100%. And what I think is interesting about this is you talked about earlier about starting slow, low and slow, I believe is the term that you use, and just get started and take baby steps and doing this and learn more about you, learn more about your brand, start posting, getting engaged in the content, right? But I think my key takeaway here is consistency.
100%.
If you start doing it, it becomes more comfortable. If you start doing that first video, the second video becomes easier. The third video, the time you get to the 100th video, it becomes easier. It's just like this podcast. I mean, when I started, it was trash. Don't go back all the way to episodes 1 through 5, guys, and listen, because they were awful. And even today, I continue to get better and better and better because I'm doing it more and more. And the same applies with things like video, text posts, carousels, whatever it is you're putting out in the world. The more you do it, the easier it's going to become.
Yeah, I will tell you this. I've been in digital marketing. It's so wild. I'm going on almost 20 years. I've been doing this since I've been 17 years old. And I've said this almost like every month for 20 years. And I mean, in some context, consistency is the most powerful force in marketing. It just bar none. I'll put that up against any other budget. Because if you just commit to just doing one small thing over and over and over, not only are you going to refine the potency of that skill, but also you create a volume of interest. And I know it's corny, but it's kind of like a personal branding 401k. The way that works is you don't put $10,000 in on Monday and open that account on Wednesday and now you can retire.
Right.
It is little investments that you make over and over and over, and you don't even look at it. You don't even worry about the ups and downs. There's going to be ups and downs, but you just keep on posting, one post a week, comment here, comment there. Maybe I open a website, like I do a personal website this year. Maybe next year I start a podcast. Maybe next year I accept that speaking engagement, whatever it is. You keep going and going and going, and it creates, now this is the corny part, buckle up, Sid. It is compounding interest. All right, see what I did there? I'm in marketing. So it, over time, people are going to see this beautiful brushstroke, all these brushstrokes on who you are. They're going to see you on LinkedIn, maybe on Twitter, maybe they heard you on a podcast, they saw a blog you wrote for the business that you work for. Like if you're a designer listening to this podcast right now, let's say you work for Gensler, HOK, Perkins and Will, whoever it is, doesn't matter. If they have a blog, ask the right for that blog. Like put it out, because then that gets shared on social media. And now you have these beautiful paint strokes over the course of 5 and 10 years that complete a really cool picture about who you are. And then you create good problems for yourself.
So what I love about this conversation today, Aaron, is that you've told some amazing stories that just hit the point home, and analogies and bringing us along this journey. And I think, again, my biggest takeaway is there's a lot of you as an individual, we as individuals hold a lot of power to control our own destiny, to put our voice out in the world, to learn about how to effectively do personal branding, how to lean into this, how to create content, and how to share your voice. And so I have a lot more questions that I want to ask you, but we just don't have time to get to them all.
Fine.
In fact, I did have a mental note that I wanted to dive into email marketing with you and get your thoughts on email marketing, but we might have to do that as a follow-up episode later. But Aaron, thank you so much for sharing all of your amazing insights, your journey and your story with us. And man, I appreciate all that you do. And thank you so much for being here with us today.
Sid, thank you so much. And let me just say about the trend report. I do want to encourage people to go listen to your backlog because you have some amazing interviews in there with folks from all corners of our industry. So it's just a real privilege to be on here. I've been a quiet. I'll tell you this anecdote before we go. I've been a quiet admirer of Sid Meadows. I saw Sid through glass windows at NeoCon just walking, and
Mhm.
I don't even remember who I was talking to. I was like, "Hey, everybody, I'm gonna have to sprint out there. There goes Sid Meadows." And so I just,
That is
it's
a true story. It happened exactly like that. I think it was Saturday afternoon, I believe. I'm walking down the halls. The hallways are dark. And yes, you came out of your showroom and we talked for a minute. Yes.
yeah. And so it's a real privilege to be on here and to get time to know a little bit more about you and
Thank
to
you.
speak to your audience. So thank you so much for the invitation.
Well, thank you for those kind words. I really appreciate it. When I started this journey 4 years ago, I never would have thought we'd be to this level today. So I take that and I receive those kind words the way that they are intended. So thank you very much. It's really hard to receive positive comments. Let me just tell you, it embarrasses me every time it happens. It just humbles me a little bit. But thank you, Aaron, very much.
No
Um,
problem.
if our community would like to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
First is find me on LinkedIn. Just put my name right in on LinkedIn. I'm sure Sid will link to me in this episode.
Yes,
Find me
we
on
will.
LinkedIn. Shoot me a DM, direct message. I would be more than happy. I love getting questions out there. That's the best way to communicate with me right now. So just find me on LinkedIn. You can also find me on Instagram, but primarily through LinkedIn is the best way to get in touch with me.
All right. We will be sure to drop that information in the show notes. Thanks again, Aaron, for being here today. Thank all of you for joining us today. Go out there and make today great, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.